Hello and welcome to another Game Nexus arcade video. Today we're going to be taking a look at Virtua Fighter 3 Team Battle, released in 1997 for the Sega Model 3 Step 1.0 arcade hardware. And as you can see here, the same assortment of playable characters from the original Virtua Fighter 3 are available. But the selection screen is a different color, and now you can actually pick 3 characters to be on your team. And the way this works is similar to some other team battle games, like King of Fighters, but without the ability to swap out your fighters at any given time. So it doesn't have that tag dynamic of some of the other games, but it does add a bit to the whole Virtua Fighter 3 formula. And the characters I picked here are the 2 new characters to the Virtua Fighter 3 game, who are Aoi and Takarashi, and of course Sarah as what I called my cleanup. The way that this works, as I had just mentioned, is as each character gets defeated, you'll move on to the next character. So what happens is, my last resort here, if all my characters died, I'd have Sarah, so she's a very strong character for me, so then I didn't really have to worry that I would have a problem, because I'm just so good at playing as that character. But one thing I'll definitely say here is, you see I've defeated all 3 characters with just one. The first couple of matches here are actually pretty easy, just like any fighting game, but they do get harder as we go, and you'll see. The fortunate part is there's only one match in this whole playthrough that I actually had lost legitimately. The other ones I somehow found my way through it, and when doing this gameplay, this was actually my 3rd run through. The first run I did, I had Sarah, Pi, and Shun, and then the second playthrough, to test to see if the characters you play would be different, I switched them up a bit, so I did Pi, Sarah, and Shun. I may very well include one of those in a future video, because I do have the footage of that still, of course, but I decided to include this one because I just liked it how I had the 2 new characters to the series, and you get kind of a look at how they were even fleshed out a little bit more with this installment, because every character did get a few extra moves for this team battle version. So it was kind of a cool revision here. Now, as far as the console versions, most people will know, it goes without saying, that there only was the Sega Dreamcast version. In Japan, this got released on November 27th of 1998. In Europe, this got released on October 14th of 1999. And of course, here in the US, this got released on October 18th of 1999. Now, from what I understand, in Japan, the Dreamcast version of Virtua Fighter 3 Team Battle for Dreamcast did really good, because at the time, a lot of the big Dreamcast fighting games hadn't come out yet. Whereas here in America, due to the fact that this game was released on Dreamcast, let's say after your Soul Caliburs or after your Dead or Alive, it was kind of one of those things like, well, we've already seen this game being so great, and then you get Virtua Fighter 3 Team Battle here, and maybe its graphics weren't as sharp, especially because Genki did such a rushed port onto the Dreamcast. It just wasn't nearly as popular in America as it was in Japan, because in Japan, for a good while there, it was kind of the only game in town. So, there wasn't so much of the comparison with other games in Japan, so you actually had a good time where it was the Dreamcast fighting game. And I believe, yeah, this is the first time that I actually end up using one of my extra team members here, because Jackie defeated Aoi.
No way you can stop me!
And some of the voices in a few of these Virtua Fighter games actually sound so silly. And now here's Takarashi, who actually ended up getting some jump moves in this version of the game, as opposed to the original arcade version, where he didn't have any moves where he actually jumped. So they actually made him a more fleshed out character. And as I probably had mentioned in my Virtua Fighter 3 arcade video, the unfortunate part of with Takarashi is that since he was such a big character, and apparently I understand he was so hard to actually implement because he's such a big character and you actually have to more or less cater all the physics toward him, because so much mass, you don't want to make it look like he weighs nothing. But from what I understand, when it came to making Virtua Fighter 4, they were going to include Takarashi, but due to the fact with getting the whole physics engine in the game to work with him, they just never did it. And then, of course, he never ended up coming back until the arcade-exclusive version, Virtua Fighter 5R, and then, of course, eventually it would be a download-only title for consoles with Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown, which was the first time console fans actually saw Takarashi return, so it was like not till the final version that most people saw him come back. And now, if you didn't notice, what I had done with all my characters is I had selected their alternate costumes instead of their default ones. And the way that you do that is you hold the start button when you select your characters, and that will select their second outfits, which is actually pretty cool.
Fight one.
And as I had made mention of, the character order is the same regardless of who you select. As with a lot of games will actually change who you actually play against based off of who you're playing as. And now I'll make mention, if you notice the time jump maybe a minute or two there, but this was the only match that I actually lost once on. And the rest of it is just going to be straight going through without a problem, which actually surprised me, because I can honestly tell you, if you're recording gameplay for especially a fighting game, it's very good to play a few times because you kind of like get into the groove of how a certain game plays. So it actually is good to kind of like, it's kind of like even playing a sport, if you will. You kind of warm up. But one thing I'd like to make mention of is the arcade version of this game came out in October of 1997. So it was a good year after the arcade version came out that the Japanese Dreamcast version came out. And as I had made mention of in the original arcade video for Virtua Fighter 3, this is the costume you see Takarashi using here is the quote-unquote naked one. Meaning he only kind of has the sumo strap with like the thing on the front like that. If I were to actually set the option in the BIOS to like naked NG, which means no good, then his outfit would look more like the costume that my character's using right now, but it would be like a black outfit like that, because I guess some regions that wasn't considered okay. And one thing I want to make mention of here is that I've noticed in my original two Virtua Fighter 3 arcade videos, I actually had the color balance on one of my video converters a little bit off, so unfortunately those videos come out as a bit dark, whereas this one I've rebalanced all the colors so everything looks nice and vibrant, and it's a lot easier to see all the detail in this game. Which any Virtua Fighter 3 videos going forward that I release will have that same color balance. Now, just like Virtua Fighter 2, you could select the actual win pose that your character did by holding guard, punch, kick, or escape, or a combination of two keys. And one thing I wanted to make mention of is, you'll notice when it showed Aoi's portrait there, every time I see that, it looks like her hair is made of like plastic or rubber, because it looks like it's just kind of molded on her head. And of course, the costume you saw her using there was actually Aoi's first costume, whereas her second one was the one that I'm using. I remember when first playing Virtua Fighter 3 TB on Dreamcast, I remember this stage and I was thinking to myself, because I was so used to like Dead or Alive 2 and other games like that, I was thinking, why can't you go up the stairs? Because you couldn't go up the stairs like with a lot of the Dead or Alive series games. A piece of distant scenery would be an area you could actually explore. Or another thing that always bothered me when I was playing this game on Dreamcast is that when you got knocked onto the train tracks, you actually ring-outed your opponent. Whereas like in a Dead or Alive game, you guys would just both fall onto the train tracks and just continue fighting, which I always thought was a kind of cool dynamic. But since this game actually, for Dreamcast at least, in Japan had come out first, it kind of was the first game to have like some of these more dynamic environments, but they didn't think of the whole multi-tiered thing. And this was another one of those stages where you get knocked off the roof and you get ring-outed, but I kept thinking to myself, why can't you just continue fighting when you actually got to the bottom there? But I guess it's just one of those things, that's just how this game handled the whole falling off the ledge type thing. And now this is one of the parts that Virtua Fighter purists tend to complain about, is the whole uneven ground, because it gives like the person with the high road kind of the edge. I wanted to make mention of real quick what one of the pages here said about this game. This is what we had on Wikipedia. It says that Team Battle is an updated version of Virtua Fighter 3 that featured battles between teams of various fighters, one after another is defeated. The Team Battle version was later released on the Dreamcast console, being one of its launch games, becoming one of the best-selling games in Japan. Now that was in Japan, it was a launch game. Virtua Fighter 3 was intended as a launch title for Dreamcast in North America, but it was delayed. Although it did eventually come out in North America, it wasn't nearly as successful in Japan, because as I said, it was the good old, in Japan it was the only game in town, whereas in America, you already had stuff like Soul Calibur and Dead or Alive 2 out, so obvious comparisons and shortcomings of this game were made because, you know, if one game has features that the other game doesn't, like I had mentioned, the whole multi-tiered environment thing that Dead or Alive 2 had, but then you go to this game and it doesn't. You just ring out your enemy when they fall off. It was just one of those shortcomings, but one thing I definitely have to say, as compared to the Dreamcast version, this version just looks amazing, it plays amazing, and of course if you have a Sega Model 3 Step 1.0 hardware with the original Virtua Fighter 3 on it, then I would highly recommend either you find somewhere you can get them, or find somebody who can burn you the 8 ROMs that are required to convert the game over, because all it is that you actually have to swap out on the Virtua Fighter 3 board is the 4 of the program ROMs and 4 of the graphics ROMs, and then your Virtua Fighter 3 becomes Virtua Fighter 3 Team Battle. Which it probably makes no difference, but my Virtua Fighter 3 was Virtua Fighter 3 version C, and then of course I just converted it to Virtua Fighter 3 Team Battle. Now I would have included a bit more of art for this game, but unfortunately it seems like there's very sparse art for Virtua Fighter 3 Team Battle arcade version, and I really didn't want to just like show the Dreamcast covers. And actually, I think that was Sarah's first showing in this, which is actually like a testament to how decent I am with the other 2 characters. Or maybe how inept the AI is, but this is on, I believe, the default level, which is like normal or medium or whatever they call it in this game. And one thing I really find weird in Virtua Fighter 3 is when you hear Wolf's voice, he has this like Western accent, and I don't really think it fits the character all that well, if you ask me. It's kind of like when I first played Dead or Alive 2 with the English voices, and I heard Bass with his Southern accent. I'm like, I'm so used to the Japanese voice, but then hearing the American voice where it's like, I won't let anyone take my daughter, and I'm thinking, that shouldn't talk like that. He just sounds so wrong. Now, one of my other playthroughs that as I said, I may be uploading as another video at some point. I actually got 2 victories against Doral here, but unfortunately, I think this one I didn't do too well. But the funny part is, I probably made mention of it in the other video, but when I first did like 2 playthroughs, the first time I actually hooked this board up, I played as Sarah and Pi. And the funny part is, both of those playthroughs, which unfortunately I didn't have my whole capture thing set up because it was kind of one of those, I just got the board and I really want to play it type things. I didn't capture them, so both of those playthroughs I actually beat Doral. And of course this was on just the regular version of Virtua Fighter 3, not the team battle version. But every time it seems like I try to record, Doral always just totally defeats me. But as I said, on one of my other playthroughs, I won 2 battles, but then she ultimately won the 5th battle, since that'd be 2 for me, 2 for her, and then 1 final. But it's probably another thing I made mention of in the other video, but the cool part about this game is it uses the dodge button, which you may have seen me use a couple times here and there during this video, but not too much, because honestly, I'm so used to playing the other Virtua Fighter games that don't have the dodge button, so it's not like something I always think about. But if you find an enemy doing crazy combos, throwing them at you all the time, just press the dodge button either up or down, and your character will strafe to the side. And that really does help, because if let's say like Wolf or Sarah or Lau or somebody launches this frontal combo that doesn't include any like sweep spin kicks or anything, you'll easily avoid them and have a free hit, because they'll still be doing their panned combo, and then you'll easily be able to hit them. But yeah, Virtua Fighter 3 Team Battle is an excellent arcade game. I would highly recommend it to anybody who is a collector of arcade hardware, or anybody who has a Virtua Fighter 3 unit already. Just get the 8 ROMs to do the conversion, because it is very much worth it. And of course, if you're not a collector of arcade hardware, the Dreamcast version is a decent version for somebody who doesn't want to get a whole like dedicated hardware unit just for this game, and just to experience the game, since at the time of this recording, the emulation is pretty sparse. Well, this has been another Game Nexus Arcade video, and I shall see you later. Bye.